alert as it is here. Caitlin Clark is scheduled to appear on NBC Sunday, March 29th as a special contributor for the network's Basketball Night in America pregame show. She'll provide commentary and analysis alongside Maria Taylor and NBA Hall of Famers Carmelo Anthony, Vince Carter, and T-Mac.
The Caitlin Clark takeover just hit a new level. March 29th, NBC Sunday Night, Basketball Night in America. She's not watching from the sidelines. She's sitting at the desk as a special contributor alongside Maria Taylor, Carmelo Anthony, Vince Carter, and Tracy McGrady, breaking down Knicks versus Thunder. A WNBA player doing NBA pregame analysis before her own season even starts. That's not just crossover appeal. That's a complete media takeover.
It really is. Let's get into it. All right. So we got the Caitlin Clark takeover going down, and we also have news on Sophie Cunningham. Now, I put out to you guys that Sophie Cunningham is not going to be protected by the Indiana Fever. I believe the 5 players that will be protected will be Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Lexi Hall, who's a protected free agent, Kelsey Mitchell, and
while Caitlin's building her broadcasting resume, the Indiana Fever are making decisions that have their fan base in complete panic mode. Sophie Cunningham, the blonde bomber, the enforcer who stood up for Clark during that Connecticut Sun ambush last season, she's not getting protected in the expansion draft, and fans are losing their minds. But here's what most people are missing about this situation.
This does not mean the Indiana Fever don't value Sophie Cunningham. This does not mean she won't be back. Okay, let's get into it. Why the Fever are unlikely to protect Sophie Cunningham in the WNBA expansion draft. Here it says the Indiana Fever face an unforgiving situation regarding Sophie Cunningham's future. All right. And shout out to Grant Young, Robin Lundberg, who's also a part of this or whatever, Sports Illustrated. This is courtesy of them. It says it won't be hard for the Indiana Fever fans. It would be hard, it would be hard for the Indiana Fever fans to part ways with Sophie.
The 5 protected players are locked in. Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Lexi Hall as a restricted free agent, Kelsey Mitchell, and Michaela Timpson. That's the list. Sophie Cunningham's name is nowhere on it. Now, before you start thinking the Fever don't value her, before you assume this is some kind of disrespect, you need to understand the actual mechanics of how this expansion draft works. Because the rules change everything.
Ambush attack that was taking place on Caitlin Clark. Make no mistake about that. Here it says it earned her notoriety from the women's basketball community and admiration from Fever fans, Caitlin Clark fans. However, the harsh reality is that the WNBA is a business, and as much as everybody wants Cunningham back in Indianapolis, the Fever are between a rock and a hard place right now. Okay, here why the Fever protecting Sophie Cunningham doesn't make sense. The rules for the upcoming WNBA expansion draft for the Toronto Temple and Portland Fire were revealed.
Sport Illustrated broke down why this decision actually makes sense from a business perspective, and it comes down to one critical rule that most fans don't know about. Toronto Tempo and Portland Fire can only select one unrestricted free agent each in this expansion draft. With over 100 veterans hitting free agency this offseason, that limitation completely changes the calculus for which players teams need to protect.
Restricted free agent. Since there are over 100 veterans who will become free agents, this limits their options, okay? Also note is that the Fever can only give one core designation to a veteran this offseason and will almost certainly use that on Kelsey Mitchell. Therefore, if one of the 2 expansion teams were to use their pick on Cunningham, and thus give her the veteran Supermax contract, as per the rules, she'll surely take that because she won't be able to get that much money from the Fever or any other team in free agency. And like I said, if Sophie Cunningham gets picked by another team in the expansion draft and they're giving her a super...
Here's the scenario the Fever are banking on. If Portland or Toronto select Sophie Cunningham in the expansion draft, they have to give her the veteran Supermax contract. That's the rule. And here's the thing. Sophie's a fantastic role player, great hustle, elite 3-point shooting, brings energy every night. But she's not a Supermax player. No team is going to use their one unrestricted free agent pick on a 29-year-old role player and then commit Supermax money to her. It doesn't make basketball sense or financial sense.
I think the Indiana Fever will be fine there, and she'll just be hitting the market as an unrestricted free agent, and the Indiana Fever would have the same opportunity to retain her. Okay? Here it says, since Cunningham most likely won't be cored by the Fever, she could also leave Indiana in free agency, even if they decide to protect her. This means the Fever would be protecting somebody who they essentially can't control. And that's the difference from Sophie Cunningham and Lexi Hall, with Lexi Hall being a restricted free agent. You get the opportunity to match any offer that's given to Lexi.
So the Fever are making a calculated bet. Leave Sophie unprotected, knowing she probably won't get selected because of that Supermax requirement. Then when she hits unrestricted free agency, they can negotiate with her on the open market just like any other team. They're not losing leverage by leaving her unprotected. They never had leverage to begin with. Because here's what happens if they protect Sophie instead. She still becomes an unrestricted free agent after the expansion draft, and if another team offers her close to max money, the Fever can't match it anyway. They don't have that kind of cap space. So protecting her doesn't actually protect her. It just wastes a protection spot that could save Michaela Timpson, who's still under contract and would absolutely get selected if left unprotected.
The team and would surely be selected if unprotected. If Michaela Timpson's unprotected, she's going to get picked. Okay, one optimistic potential outcome is that neither expansion team selects her. They can select one unrestricted free agent after all, and Cunningham then decides to return to the Indiana Fever in free agency. But the hope likely won't ease anxiety for Indiana Fever fans come expansion draft. So, you know, there is a chance that the Indiana Fever could lose Sophie Cunningham on the open market, because if somebody jumps out the window and say, hey, we got $950K for you, I don't believe the Indiana Fever.
This is where the Lexi Hall comparison becomes important. Hall is a restricted free agent. That means if another team makes her an offer, Indiana has the right to match it and keep her. That's real protection. That's why she's worth using a protection spot on. Sophie Cunningham is unrestricted. The Fever have no matching rights, so even if they protect her through the expansion draft, they could still lose her in free agency to a team that simply offers more money. The risk calculation is actually pretty straightforward. If you protect Sophie, you definitely lose Michaela Timpson to the expansion draft. Timpson's a rookie who showed real promise, she's on a cheap contract, and she's got years of team control left. If you leave Sophie unprotected, you probably keep both players, because again, no expansion team is giving supermax money to a 29-year-old role player when they're trying to build a franchise from scratch.
So, but I think the Indiana Fever have an awesome shot at retaining Sophie Cunningham once she hits the open market. I don't believe either one of these teams will select her in the expansion draft and want to give her a max contract. She's just not a max player. We love her. Great role player, great hustle, great energy, can shoot the three, but she's not a max player. So I don't see the Portland Fire or Toronto Tempo completely jumping out the window to give her that kind of contract. So I believe the Indiana Fever will have a great opportunity to retain her on the open market. Get down in the comments and let me know what you guys think.
Now let's talk about the worst case scenario that has Fever fans worried. What if Sophie hits free agency and another team offers her $950,000? The Fever probably can't match that. Their realistic ceiling is somewhere between $600,000 and $650,000 for her. That's a $300,000 gap. And nobody should expect Sophie to leave that much money on the table out of loyalty. But here's the reality check. What team is jumping out the window to offer Sophie Cunningham close to max money? She missed a significant chunk of last season with injuries. She's 29 years old. She's a specialist, not a star. The teams with that kind of cap space are either rebuilding and want to invest in younger players, or they're contenders who need that money for a legitimate difference maker. The Fever's bet is that Sophie's market value on the open market is going to be in that $600,000 to $700,000 range. Maybe she gets a few offers around $750,000. At that point, Indiana can be competitive, they can make a real pitch, and Sophie gets to decide if the extra $100,000 is worth leaving a championship contender with the league's biggest star and a fan base that absolutely loves her. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark is out here building an entire media empire before the season even starts. And this isn't just about one pre-game show appearance. Think about what this represents. Stephanie White, the Fever's head coach, is doing NCAA tournament broadcasts. She's on TV more than she's in the gym right now. And apparently nobody at the Fever's front office thought that was a problem during expansion draft preparation. Clark's doing NBA analysis. White's doing college analysis, and the actual roster decisions are being made by a front office that's trying to thread the needle on keeping their core together while navigating the most complicated expansion draft rules in WNBA history. This is what happens when your franchise goes from irrelevant to must-see TV in one season. Everybody wants a piece of your people. The NBC opportunity for Clark is significant beyond just the exposure. She's getting reps in a broadcast booth, building relationships with NBA legends, showing she can analyze basketball at the highest level. When her playing career eventually ends, and we're talking many years from now, she's setting herself up for a broadcasting career that could rival her playing career. That's forward thinking. That's understanding your brand extends beyond the court. But let's bring this back to the immediate situation. The expansion draft is coming. The Fever have to submit their protected list. And when Sophie Cunningham's name isn't on it, social media is going to explode. Fans are going to accuse the front office of not valuing toughness, of abandoning the player who protected their franchise player, of making a cold business decision that ignores team chemistry. And all of that reaction is going to miss the actual strategy at play. This isn't about not valuing Sophie. It's about understanding the rules well enough to exploit them. It's about recognizing that protecting her doesn't actually protect her, and that leaving her unprotected probably results in keeping her anyway. The Fever are betting that expansion teams will use their one unrestricted free agent pick on a younger player with more upside, or a legitimate star who's unhappy with their current situation. They're betting that when Sophie hits the open market, her realistic offers will be in a range they can compete with. And they're betting that Sophie values winning and playing with Caitlin Clark enough that she won't chase every extra dollar. Those are reasonable bets, but they're still bets. And if Sophie ends up in Portland or Toronto, either through the expansion draft or free agency, the Fever are going to have to answer some very difficult questions about whether they got too clever with their roster management. Here's what makes this whole situation fascinating from a league perspective. The WNBA expansion draft rules are specifically designed to prevent new teams from just poaching stars and immediately contending. The limit of one unrestricted free agent per team, the requirement to give supermax money to anyone you select who's a free agent, the protection rules that let existing teams keep their core, all of it is structured to make expansion teams build slowly. But those same rules create these weird strategic situations where valuable players get left unprotected because teams know they're safe. It's game theory, it's poker, and the Fever are going all in on their read of how Portland and Toronto are going to approach this draft. If they're right, they keep both Sophie and Michaela, they maintain their core, and they look like geniuses. If they're wrong, they lose a fan favorite who brought toughness and three-point shooting, and they have to explain to Caitlin Clark why her enforcer is gone. The stakes are real. The decision is made. Now we wait to see if the bet pays off. So here's the question for you. If you're running the Indiana Fever, do you protect Sophie Cunningham and definitely lose Michaela Timpson? Or do you leave Sophie unprotected, bet that she doesn't get selected, and try to re-sign her in free agency? Because you can't have both. The rules force you to choose. Drop your answer in the comments, and if you think there's a third option I'm missing, explain it, because this is the kind of decision that defines whether a front office is smart or just lucky. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell, because when this expansion draft goes down, and we see whether the Fever's strategy worked, you're going to want to be here for that breakdown. This is just the beginning of a wild WNBA offseason.